Honey Sound Broadcasting, an affiliate of the Bilko Media Network.
Bill, how about you start us off?
Okay, so Rogue One, better than The Force Awakens or way better than The Force Awakens?
Better than The Force Awakens because, like a vine sucking the life out of a tree, it parasitically grabs and nutrients from the host of the original 3 movies and uses that to support itself.
Correct.
Yes. And in preparation for this, as you did too, I went back and listened to our Force Awakens review.
Yep.
And a large part of my criticism directed at Force Awakens doesn't apply here, but the only reason why that doesn't apply is because it relies on the already established original trilogy Star Wars universe. And a lot of my problems with Force Awakens was the fact that it was trying to kind of create a new world, or at least a extension of the old world, and it had not fleshed that world out at all, or really given backstory into the world. And I think if I can maybe sum up my complaints with these 2 movies, I think it really is backstory.
It needs more of it, you mean?
Yeah, it needs more of it. It doesn't have any. Did you feel like this movie, anyway, expanded on the Star Wars universe?
Let's back up a little bit more, because within that Force Awakens review, you clearly stated that you would not see this movie, that you've had enough of it, and blah, 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 blah. And so I was really shocked that you told me you saw this movie and wanted to do a review on it.
Okay, so you can thank Alamo Drafthouse. Alamo Drafthouse. Have a fun having time for the entire family. We're getting paid! Yeah! No, we're not getting
a plug.
Yeah. Why I saw this movie is because I wanted to have a couple pints of beer and fish and chips and watch a movie in a theater. And Rogue One was the most accessible thing to do it. So you really can thank food and beer and also a $50 Ticketmaster card, gift card for this review. That is the genesis of this. So
I see. So the truth comes out.
So the truth comes out. It's lo and behold, I'm not this massive Star Wars fan, my lord.
It just kind of happened by accident, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it just kind of happened by accident, and then I figured, all the stuff that we were gonna be able to see, Rogue One would probably be, the safest bet. I wouldn't say that I stomped out of the theater demanding my money back. I like this movie more than I like The Force Awakens, but again, it's for the reason I described, because it parasites off of the
established movie, yeah.
The established universe. The Force Awakens, I had to leave the theater and pound a pint and then walk back in order to stand it. I was just like, oh my god, it's just beat for beat A New Hope. I didn't get that feeling in Rogue One.
This one.
Maybe that was because I was continuously supplied by alcohol.
Might have had something to do with it.
That might have had something to do with it. Yeah.
So after you saw it, you said this is the next review we should do, and I'm obviously here on vacation in Destin, Florida, and so you made me pay $10 American and 8 cents to go to see a Star Wars movie by myself, which I've never been to the movies by myself before, and I sure didn't think it would ever be a Star Wars movie that I would go to see by myself. But there I went like an idiot to the local theater down the street to see this thing. I kind of expected it to be an empty theater because it's mid-January and been out for a while, and it was a 6:30 showing on a Monday, and I'm like, nobody's going to be there. But there was probably a good 15 to 20 people there, so I was kind of shocked to see that kind of a turnout.
Yeah. And the reason why we're doing this, if anybody out there is listening, is because you're all wrong. It wasn't good.
True. So to rehash my backstory, when I heard they were doing this movie, I wanted to like it because I like when they go back and tell things that bleed into movies. So this is in and of itself a true prequel in my book.
Yes. It wasn't a movie that could stand on its own.
Well, that's the thing. They kept promoting it as a standalone Star Wars movie, and I don't see how they can even make that claim when especially you look at the ending, which literally bleeds directly into A New Hope. So how is this a standalone Star Wars movie?
It's not.
It's by definition a prequel. when they announced in the late 90s that they were going back and making 3 prequels to Star Wars, you saw episode 1 and you're like, okay, young Darth Vader is a kid running around, that's his backstory. Over the next 2 movies, I thought the end of 3 would be the end of what we now know as Rogue One. Like, I thought it would bleed right into A New Hope. And we never got that. I mean, it stopped, 20 years too soon?
Yeah.
And so what happened over those next 20 years is a complete mystery. And so what we know as the 3 prequels are kind of their own standalone movies off to the side, whereas Rogue One, in and of itself, is a true prequel by any way you slice it. I mean, like I said, it tells the backstory that bleeds into A New Hope. And I kind of want to go back and watch A New Hope to see, how it plays off. Because when you watch A New Hope, it was a standalone movie at the time, and it was the first one, right? And so you're establishing everything. But now that for example, the entire Rebel fleet just fought this battle to steal the plans, and all those people who were on that Rebel headquarters base, when you go through and watch A New Hope now, do you have a different mindset knowing that these people literally just experienced Rogue One, a week before, or however long A New Hope happened? Because obviously A New Hope starts with Vader taking on Leia's ship, which literally escaped at the end. So you got to think that was within the next hour they were all at Tatooine fighting each other.
Right, but I don't think that it would have too much of an effect, honestly, because it's not like Leia was in the film, and we don't learn anything new about Leia or her motivations or
no, but
why
you think of
ship,
obviously everybody saw the Death Star appear at the end and shoot down, and they know about the Death Star. They know there's a giant super weapon. And so when Leia delivers R2-D2 in A New Hope at the end, not the end, but before the trench run and all that, how does that conversation now play back, knowing that all those people just already knows everything about the Death Star? It's not like they're seeing this for the first time, right? And you think of Jyn touting trying to convince everybody, oh, my father built in this flaw. You have to destroy the whatever, or cause something in the core to explode. Whereas in A New Hope, they didn't know that. Or at least I didn't think they did when I first watched it, and most people did. But now that Rogue One came out beforehand, they already have this preconceived knowledge of what to look for in those plans that they obtained. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I guess.
So let's kind of walk through the movie then.
So first of all, I want to kind of point out what I thought was the most jarring and first thing of it was there's no title crawl.
Yes, and that's what I was gonna get to is I did not like that. I did not like how there was no Star Wars intro, your standard give me the story of what's going on here.
When you have, let's be honest, intro crawl is a bit of lazy exposition, all right? I just get to throw up whatever I want to drown the story in. Let's get it going. Give me the backstory. Again, problem with backstory, I didn't like The Force Awakens, but at least it had a title crawl that said Luke has disappeared, and then it gives some, not enough, but some, exposition on what's happening. Here you're just thrown into it, and you have no idea what's going on. So, I didn't know I didn't know where we were, in terms of the story.
Yeah, I did not like that. I did not like being thrown into this. It just happens, and then they had these conversations where the guy's coming down in his little ship, and the lady calls some guy on a phone or whatever, and he's like, he's here. I will meet you in the place. Or so obviously this was prearranged, and they're only doing this to build suspense for the audience, and it's that doesn't work for me because I know it's only there to build suspense for the audience. Because why would you say something like that? Why would you call somebody up and says, he's here, I'm coming for you, or whatever she said? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the dude parks a mile away. Why didn't he just land near the...
Yep. Yeah.
Near the house? And I don't know, the whole thing was weird, and like you said, you didn't really know what was going on the whole time, and then all of a sudden, boop, okay, 15 years later. What?
Yeah, and so I enjoyed the dialogue between what I'm going to just call Dollar Store Tarkin and Jin's dad. And I was kind of okay, this is kind of cool. This is a guy who's in hiding from the Empire, but obviously this guy is really high up in the Empire, but he's kind of he has a personal connection with this guy. So he's kind of like, okay, just come on, buddy, don't be stupid. Okay, you know what's up. Come with us. We'll make your life real nice, and everything will be grand.
Yep.
And then they shoot his wife, and I'm like, oh, that's not gonna work. You're not gonna get him on your side doing that. And then he tells Jyn Erso to run away, and again, it's the same problem with Rey. Like, there's nothing to her. Okay, she hid in a hole for 15 years, and Rey was scavenging crap for sustenance ration for 15 whatever years. Like, there's both of these characters don't have any backstory, don't have any motivation.
Right, they're kind of similar in many ways, and
they're the exact same character,
almost too closely. Actually, this whole movie arc I thought was suspiciously familiar to Force Awakens.
There was a real deja vu moment when she was fighting the stormtroopers in that city.
Yeah.
And that guy Cassian was running up to help her, and like she's just wailing on all these stormtroopers, and like she just takes out an entire squad for herself. She's kind of like, oh, okay, she doesn't need any help. I'm like, I just saw that scene in your last movie,
right?
Like, and it's not about rah girl power. It's about establishing credible threats for your enemies. If it's established that this character can just run down an alley and knock out 17 stormtroopers, with her blaster rifle butt, then you're fine. I mean, I don't feel worried about you. How could I view you as possibly in danger when I just watched you wipe out and as a part of this, I went back and I kind of watched fight scenes from like A New Hope.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you remember that scene where like Han runs into all the stormtrooper patrol and like Han charges them with Chewbacca, and they run after him, and then Han winds up in like a room full of stormtroopers, and then he runs out right out of there. In these movies, Han Solo and Chewbacca would have just waded into a room of 800 stormtroopers and killed all of them.
Yes, I agree with that.
That's what would happen in these movies. So it doesn't really work out. So, but let's go back to the beginning. So we that introduction scene, Forrest Whitaker goes and tells Jyn Erso to hide in a hole, and she does so for 15 years. And then we have a real quick, very disorienting planet by planet shot.
Oh my god, you bounce around to 5 or 6 planets in 2 minutes, and I'm like, what's going on? I'm completely lost here. That whole sequence was just all over the place, and it took me a while to get oriented.
Yeah, and so on that space bazaar on the asteroid, the Cassian gets introduced.
Yes.
I think it's interesting that they kind of and that's a theme that I kind of got introduced in the first hour and then got dropped. The fact that you have morally gray rebels, which you really should.
Right.
The fact that the Cassian guy, he just meets up with some guy, and I don't really remember what was going on, but then he ends up just shooting him, and then he runs away.
Right. Well, that's the guy who said, "Oh, this pilot defected, and he brought news of a super weapon that the Emperor's building, or something like that." What was never really explained is how did this guy know about that defection?
No, you're right. And it jumped around way too much. And
I feel like in the beginning it just jumped all over the place.
One of those locations should have been the Death Star. A main location should have been the Death Star.
Exactly.
It's about stealing the plans from or of the Death Star.
There was way too little Death Star in this movie.
Yeah, and
I expected more construction of it or building it. But by the time the movie starts,
it's fully operational.
Yeah, it's ready to go, and it's they're backing in the thing, and then that's the last you see of it until the end, and it's no, we should learn more about the backstory of the actual Death Star, of how it was built. Show the dad building it or designing that flaw or something. Show him kicking out the pilot. Show him start with the plan of defecting the pilot. Show that scene. Don't just jump into the middle of it and ignore the whole Death Star.
And the idea that, like, the plans for the Death Star are kept on this shielded planet with, like, a giant
Yeah,
tower
well, we need to talk about that. And
on a beach. But just conceptually, that's possible, I suppose. But surely there must be a copy of the plans on the Death Star. You are building it. Like, if something goes wrong and you have to send the maintenance guy down to hatch 287B, you know, he's gonna need a schematic.
well, let's talk about that then, because that planet was what, like the Emperor Repository or something?
I don't really even know.
Like,
I
to
mean,
me, it was like
maybe
the like a
real
library.
archive.
It was like the Empire's library of knowledge or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're trying to hide the Death Star from, like, the Senate and all these people, why are you putting it in this obviously public place for information? Wouldn't you keep that, like, to yourself? Why is it in the archive in the first place?
Mm.
And why do they need to keep the Death Star a secret in the first place? I didn't understand that either. Because doesn't the Emperor have, like, total power? Like, didn't he dissolve the Senate and all that?
No, because at the beginning of A New Hope, Tarkin comes in, and he says something like, the last vestiges of the old Republic have vanished. The Emperor has dissolved the Senate. And so the Senate still exists. It would be interesting to maybe see that it's, like, been totally taken over, and maybe there's, like, a rebellious, you know, faction or something. But we don't see any of that. Like, and, like, I'm not necessarily sure I blame them after seeing, you know, endless hours of stupid Senate stuff in the prequel. Awful, but, you know, at least that tried to show what this world looks like.
Yeah, but why is it a secret? Why can they not know about this? And two, how did they build this thing in secret then? Because obviously, like, they were on that Jedha planet or whatever, and there it is. Like, you can look at it, and there's the Death Star floating above. So people are going to notice this thing's being built. The whole thing was just weird.
Yeah.
But I needed more Death Star backstory, and I did not get it.
Jyn Erso is not a very engaging character. He's just kind of vaguely pissed off, maybe for the first half of the movie, and then
Who is?
second half
I missed that.
Jyn Erso. She's
Jyn. The lady.
Right.
Because you can say the same thing about the Spanish dude.
Yeah, the Spanish dude too. Really, why couldn't this story be about the guy who was actually designing the Death Star?
Right,
like,
that's what I mean. Like, why isn't it about him and his little
show
plan?
Him be conflicted, you know, wondering what he's doing. Maybe it's right. Maybe show him slowly, you know, gradually kind of coming over to the idea that, hey, the Empire is the way to go. That entire space station wasn't being constructed because, ooh, Emperor Palpatine's so evil. It was because people thought that this was probably a good idea. You know, at some level, you know, someone at some point had some rationalization or justification for it. And if anybody was going to deliver that one, it was going to be like in a scene between Dollar Store Tarkin and Jyn's dad. But it wasn't done. You really just sort of never... You meet him twice in the movie. You meet him at
the beginning, obviously.
Right when Jyn Erso goes and hides in the hole, and then you meet him right when he dies.
Yeah, and for some reason, that little meeting they had was, like, outside in the rain. Wouldn't you go inside and have a little sit-down in a meeting boardroom or something? Like, why are you pulling everybody into the storm? Obviously exposed.
Well, it was really interesting, too, because wasn't it like they land on, like, the opposite side of a canyon, and then, like, somehow Jyn gets to the bottom of the canyon and starts climbing this giant ladder.
Yeah.
This insane ladder.
Yep.
Up to the other side of the canyon. Who built that ladder? Why did you need to build that ladder? Was somebody playing softball and they just hit it too far? And, well, we got to get it back. It's our only ball. You know, better build a giant ladder in the crevice of the earth. Why?
Well, wasn't it like a mining outpost or something? Maybe it had something to do with that if the elevator broke down. Mm-hmm. But I see your point. Like, who designed this stuff? Because, like, even if you think of, like, the end when they go onto that giant satellite up above, where are the controls? No, they're not right next to the satellite. They're way out on this, like, plank. It's like, who designed this stuff?
My same critique kind of goes from Force Awakens here, you know. How many Star Wars movies we've had now? 8? How many are about destroying the Death Star? Like 5? You know, because that's ultimately what everybody was motivated by in this movie. You know,
Well, that's what I said. It's like this. It's the same story as Force Awakens. Like everybody's. We say Force Awakens is just a rehash of A New Hope, but it's told in like the modern story sense with the modern edits and modern this and that. And this was the exact same thing. Like, what happens? You have these no-name characters in the beginning, aka Jin and this Cassian guy. They go on an adventure to discover something. They come back, they do a sit down, and they just determine, we got to go get X or destroy Y. And in this case, it's we need to get X on that planet. You can associate that exact same end with destroy the Super Death Star in Force Awakens. It's the same setup, same scene. Let's all run on foot into this base and do something and hope we survive. It's the same thing.
Yeah, and the part of the movie where I just started to tune out was every time it was like Mon Mothma and see, there we go. She's a 2-bit character from Return of the Jedi that nobody knows. All of those scenes where like she's sitting down or like where Jin is in front of people who are high up in the Rebel Alliance. It's like, who are you again? Who are you? Like, excuse me? You just kind of came out of nowhere, and so she shows up. But first, I want to kind of backtrack a little second because I want to talk about like what I think is the aborted theme that was in the beginning of this movie, which is like morally gray rebels. Okay, the fact that you might have to do really awful things and insurgent tactics and ambushes and torture, right? You know, or you may be motivated to do these things and still be in the Alliance. Like the pilot guy, right? He gets brain raped by the squid monster, but he's fine afterwards. I was really thinking that Forrest Whitaker was kind of like putting it up like, oh well, he's going into the monster that's going to read his mind and he's never going to be the same again. But he was just kind of fine 48 hours after that. So like kind of took away the impact of oh, you're really doing something that's morally questionable. No, you're not. You're just giving him a hangover for like a couple of days. You know, like that's the attitude that I got. But like the idea that you would have maybe people who were nominally in the Rebel Alliance, but they were not good guys. I was kind of, okay, that's interesting. Star Wars really hasn't gone there before. Okay. I mean, probably the closest you could get to that is Lando Calrissian, right?
Yep.
Who
double betrays.
Double crossed him, but later kind of joined up with him, and but they dropped that. And nowhere is it clearer that they just kind of dropped that is when Jin is going out to save her father, okay, and she's going with people who are sent to kill her father, okay. Ooh, good tension. So Cassian, gets on a ridge on that planet and lines up the shot, and then he just sort of goes, nah, for no real, like, again, you've known Jin, you, maybe had like 15 lines of dialogue with this character, like, since meeting her, and you're persuaded to not fill out your mission from your superior officers. How are you convinced not to do this?
Well, if we can explore that a little bit, I think what may have triggered that was on the way to that planet, that's when Jin said, I saw my father's message. He's not really working with the Empire. He's actually with us, and he designed this flaw, so he's actually a good guy. And I think that was conflicting with his orders of he must be killed because he's building the super weapon.
Well, that would be real nice if Jin had some friggin' proof to back that up, but
right. That's they didn't, and that was the whole. They went into that. That's the
biggest flaw of the movie is that everybody kind of does what Jin says because the plot demands it. Like even to the point where they have another one of these where it's like she's giving that supposedly rousing speech, to get them all to go on like the suicide mission. Like they don't know who you are. Mm-hmm. Why are they listening to you? You're basically just saying, okay, we don't have a plan, but we're just gonna rush into a machine gun nest, like and all, like with no plan. And literally, like I laughed in the theater because there's this moment where she's talking, and then it's literally like something out of South Park where they're going rubber, rhubarb. And then up in the voice is like, "Let her speak," you know, and then it's like, "Listen to what she has to say." Like two voices, like really clear,
Yes.
you know, just pop out of the background. So it's one thing that she and this little ragtag crew that just sort of all hop in together with no real reason to. They all kind of band together. You know, it's one thing if she takes that team, like on an infiltration kind of mission or something at the very end to get the plans. It's an entirely another thing to
Storm the rebel base or storm the Emperor's base.
Do a full-fledged assault.
Yeah, I mean, when you get into the final battle there, I do have some comments.
Yeah, so
on their plan.
So first of all, the final, let's get into the final battle scene because I think do we even want to talk about like the two Chinese dudes? I mean, I liked the guy who was like kind of a Jedi but kind of not.
I did not like him because I didn't know what he was. He wasn't a Jedi, but how does he know the Force? And he's blind, and yet seems to be a lot more powerful than somebody who has sight and was a Jedi. Like, I was confused by him.
Well, I think that, you know, maybe there's like an in-between ground where like people aren't Jedi, but they still are like Force sensitive or whatever. And you know, he's kind of a monk kind of character.
Right, but even him, like, he was more powerful than like Obi-Wan in his prime. You know what I mean? Like, he was doing all this stuff blind.
Yeah. So, like, that's another problem I had. Him and Jin both are able to, like, take out entire squads of stormtroopers, like, no problem. You know, and I'm with, like, just a stick. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're turning, stormtroopers are now the new putty men. That's what they are. You know? They're just dudes in armor that you can wail on. And the armor, like, seriously, like, what? But again, that's an old.
What does that actually do?
We keep coming across these problems that Star Wars really hasn't fixed, like how stormtroopers. Why do they suck so much? So yeah, like honestly, they were kind of just that was weird. Like I definitely felt like they were kind of written into the script afterwards or something because it was just sort of like
they're not needed. Like if you take both of those guys away, literally nothing changes.
Except that I think a switch wouldn't get thrown in the climactic final battle.
No, somebody would like shoot it or run out there and dramatically die by pulling it down or something. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't need to be this blind Chinese guy who knows the Force.
Let's just skip. Oh, what about the robot? What do you think?
He was far too sarcastic for a robot.
Yes. And the way that they introduced him was kind of like, oh, he's a reprogrammed Imperial droid, but he was reprogrammed wrong, so he says things that he thinks that are inappropriate. And it makes you wonder, because he took out, like, about 30 stormtroopers defend, you know.
Right, why doesn't the rebels, like, build robots?
Right. Like, it's one thing if it's just, you know, if robots are C-3PO and they're just like, you know, like, nobody's gonna view C-3PO as, and that was my problem with the prequels, right? You have these fantastic robots that are way better and way more cheaper and expendable than stormtroopers. Why the hell weren't you just building robots this entire time? So we've blown through all the characters. Let's get to that final battle.
Okay.
Right.
Well, let's start by talking about that planet to begin with, because that planet had something that was never introduced anywhere else: a giant shield.
No, that's not true.
Where else does that exist?
Well,
where you have a giant planetary.
In Return of the Jedi, you had a shield that was protecting the second Death Star.
Correct, but that was like on the moon, and it was like projecting up.
Okay.
Why wasn't this shield protecting the Death Star already?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, like it seems like you're building this thing. Yeah. Wow. Okay, you're right. Yeah.
You know, like if they have that kind of technology.
I never even thought about that.
If they have this technology, why doesn't every planet have this? Because it seems like a standard thing that you'd want to put on like Naboo and all these, you know, one-offs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And two, okay, let's just say for the sake of argument, it's really, really expensive, takes a lot of power, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Okay, you're telling me this thing's protecting, like, the archives, which I can see is an important thing. But
the archives are less important
than the Death Star.
Yes.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're going to protect something, why wouldn't you have this thing around the Death Star already? Whereas, like you said, yes, they had something similar in Return of the Jedi in the third one, but that was like based on the moon and it was like projecting up, and you could still destroy the shield by destroying the thing on the moon, which they did, or turning it down or whatever. Whereas this thing seemed to be self-contained. You know,
Yeah,
like
wow,
the generator is on the inside of the shield.
That's a huge. I didn't even think about that.
Flaw number 2 of this thing. You go to the trouble to produce a planetary-wide shield, right? An impenetrable planetary-wide shield. Why do you have one door? Why isn't it like an airlock where you have a 2-stage entrance where you go in, the back closes, and then the bottom opens and you can continue on your way? Because that way, something like this battle would never happen where you have X-Wings come out of light speed, out of nowhere, and just dive right into the hole before they can close it. And another thing, this is a laser. Why doesn't it just close instantly? Why does it take 10 minutes to close your door? Again, if this is a planetary-wide superstructure to protect the planet, your entrance is a pretty big flaw.
Man, that's good. I didn't even think about that. It's like every time they make a new movie, it creates problems with the old ones. You know, like
Right.
Like every time. I don't know if maybe is there just some like cancer in Star Wars that cripples these new movies with these massive plot holes like that? Or is it just like bad writing? I don't understand, but yeah, you're right. And there's lots of stuff like that got revealed in the prequels. I'm looking at you, midichlorians, right? And then in The Force Awakens, there's like, okay, how did they build something that was more destructive than the Death Star when the Empire's been defeated?
Mm-hmm.
Like these big questions get brought up and they don't. Yeah, like, wow, okay, that's even worse than I thought. I was just going to go on to the AT-AT. Okay, now, so Bill, I'm going to make you an Imperial commander for a day. All right, and I'm going to task you with destroying a insurgent group of small arms on an island. What is the vehicle of choice that you would least prefer?
Well, I tell you what, I'm sure not going to do is send out all my TIE fighters. No, they never send them out. They go directly for these AT-ATs, and they never send out like the ground troops. And the ones they do, they send out like very little. And it's like,
Yeah.
Okay, so like bombs go off, right? They see it in the tower. Bombs are going off. What do? They send out a handful of ground troops and these AT-AT walkers. That's it for like what, 20 minutes. This is the wave that comes out. Then all of a sudden, up in the sky, the whole Rebel fleet shows up, right? Surrounded by Star Destroyers, because there's like at least two up there.
Yeah.
And they don't do squat. They just sit there for like 10 minutes and do nothing.
Yeah.
I timed it. It was a good 15 or 20 minutes between those rebels showing up and the TIE fighters being deployed from that base, and before any fighting happened amongst the rebels up in the sky. Why? What took so long? You see the rebels. You even stated, oh, those are the rebel fleets. Why is nobody shooting at them?
I couldn't tell you. But it isn't okay. So where'd the AT-ATs come from? You're on an island. Like, are they like in underwater pods just waiting to be raised to the surface? Like,
maybe.
I feel like you would have seen these things. They're the size of a mountain.
They did do a lot of like panning back shots, like when they first landed and stuff, and there was no AT-ATs anywhere.
Yeah, like if something's gonna sneak up on you, it ain't gonna be a fucking 4-footed. And that's another thing too. Okay, so maybe, and I'm qualifying this with an extreme maybe. The AT-ATs made sense in The Empire Strikes Back. Okay, I don't think any organization that's capable of orbital bombardment needs,
Ground
what
troops.
amounts to a tank with really skinny legs moving it around.
No, they're completely
but
impractical.
A tank that can't swing its
They're
turret.
completely
That's another problem
impractical.
too. It's like, okay, if there are rebels shooting at me and I'm in the AT-AT, it's gonna take me like a half hour to do a 50-point turn so I can even start to bring my guns to bear on them. They're completely, okay, they're well shielded from attacks, I guess, on there, but eventually someone's going to figure out a way to break through that armor. Yeah, AT-ATs don't make any sense, really, to me, and they sure as hell don't make any sense. The stupid island fight. where you're
No,
trying
that's what I'm
to
saying. Like,
you're trying to
send
knock
out,
off
send
rebel
out.
insurgents in close quarters with your own troops. It's insane.
Right, like send out at the very least the TIE fighters. Why are you bothering with these ATSTs or whatever they are?
Well, yeah. Well, the AT. Okay, so I wanted to say ATSTs. That would make sense, right? They're small.
The smaller
they're,
ones?
They're like they're really more of like
Oh,
they're
that's right. They only
mechs.
had those at the Jeddah place, which that
Yeah.
was that and on those tiny little streets that was unrealistic.
Yeah, it was unrealistic, but like at least I feel like that machine makes more sense as
The
a
bigger one,
anti, personnel machine. Like the ATs were there in New Hope to, slowly walk up on the shield generator or whatever and blast through the battle. So the battle, it really felt like they were rushing into it with no plan whatsoever. And it felt like a lot like the battle, the end battle. I was thinking, okay, all right, I feel like I'm really watching the Return of the Jedi end scene. But the reason why that was there, the reason why all these ships, because you just think that like for the Empire or whatever, the Star Destroyers are a dime a dozen, and for the Rebels, like these ships are really valuable, so they wouldn't really want to commit them unless they really needed to go all in. And for the third movie, the Return of the Jedi, it made sense that they were wanting to go all in because it was this or nothing. Once the second Death Star was up and running, then everybody was hosed because there was no thermal exhaust port. How are you going to defeat it now, suckers? That maybe made a little more sense. This really didn't, because like the whole idea is that it's probably a suicide mission. You're got to go steal the plans. That's an infiltration thing. That's like where you disguise yourself and you kind of try to fake credentials.
Yeah.
And you get informants on the inside. That's like a spy or a heist movie. That's not like Saving Private Ryan.
It really is. Like it should have been the spy and espionage type of thing, and done it all covertly.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I mean, the battle, I guess, was a diversion, but that battle would have been lost extremely quickly because they only brought 15 people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, but you'd be dead in minutes if this was a real thing.
And nobody points that out.
Here's a question: did her dad smuggle out the plans with his message? Or did he say to go get the plans?
No. And that's like, okay, so the guy had the ability to create a hologram to say, oh, I love you, you're so great. By the way, I'm sorry, the last time I saw you when you were 4.
5 or 8, yeah.
5. So this guy's a stranger to her. Her motivation is to go rescue her dad. Dad who? She's never had a dad.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that if
no, she would be emotionally detached by that point.
Yeah, she would be completely emotionally detached. She's lived enough of her life to have an identity that doesn't really involve her dad, and that be her main motivation. I'm sorry, I'm just not buying it. And then and having the Rebel Alliance to have this person who has no proof, who has connections to the Empire that they're trying to fight, and having that person not only tell them what to do, but be their Joan d'Arc and lead them into battle, that's ridiculous. I can't believe that. I thought that the action sequences in the fight were very well done, but
yeah, I mean, during the battles themselves, like, I'll give them that. Like, that felt like Star Wars during the fight scenes, especially the end. I thought they did a good job with the battle scenes at the end. It's just that in the whole context of the story of what's going on, it wouldn't have lasted that long, and it didn't make any sense why they were doing it in the first place. So
the space battle doesn't really make sense from both a in-universe perspective or a story perspective. Because the reason why we had space battles in first and third original movies, right, is because characters we cared about were flying ships and fighting, okay? That was not the case here. You did not have anybody up above the planet that we cared about. Yeah, that you knew of. So why was this necessary? And that's the reason why it was necessary is because we've got to have a space battle.
Yeah, but I mean that goes back to my point. Like, the whole Rebel fleet shows up in their rickety ships, and there's like 2 or 3 Star Destroyers right there. Why are they not ripped to shreds, like, instantly?
Yeah.
And then you have at the end, like, obviously the whole fleet is waiting for, like, the transmission, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why aren't they all listening to the transmission? Why is it just the one ship that can only receive? And even
Yeah, that's another thing too. It's
even
like
if it's just only one ship that can receive at a time, I can maybe buy that. But why, when they receive the plans, why don't they instantly email it out to each other so that, like, every ship there has these things, and it's not like on just one floppy disk?
yeah. See, that's another problem too with like how I thought that this was going to work out versus like how it actually worked out. Because like if it's like a package that got smuggled out and then you need to deliver this package and whatever, that's one thing. But if we're talking about like a transmission here, then like
Right.
why couldn't you just make
everybody
it
turn to channel 2, like,
right
and
Yeah.
receive this so that in case we all die except one of us, that one ship can escape with the plans.
Yeah, I think that these movies are starting to show their limitations because Star Wars is a 40 whatever year old. The original Star Wars movie, you cannot escape the fact that they were making this with ideas and preconceptions that were formed in the late 1970s. The idea that you'd be able to copy something and then infinitely distribute it to us in 2017 is very plausible and something that could have been done. If we're talking about 1977, we're still dealing with like James Bond has to steal the secret tape that's somewhere, and
that's really the equivalent of what's happening here, I guess.
Yeah,
right. But I mean, I can buy that if they say, 70s technology, blah blah blah. We're dealing with those rules where you have to get that physical disc to the ship and all that. But like I said, we're dealing with a transmission here. So all the ships should have been able to receive at the same time. I don't see why you have to have a specialized single connection to just one. Have you, since you've seen Rogue One, gone back and reread the intro to A New Hope?
I haven't.
Because I have, and I think it's interesting because, and I got it up here, it says, it is a period of civil war. Rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory against the evil Galactic Empire. AKA what I can only assume is the end of Rogue One. It says, during the battle, rebel spies managed to steal secret plans to the Emperor's ultimate weapon, the Death Star, an armored space station with enough power to destroy an entire planet. Pursued by the Emperor's sinister agents, Princess Leia races home aboard her starship, custodian of the stolen plans that can save her people and restore freedom to the galaxy. So, I think that's a very interesting tie-in of what you saw at the end of Rogue One that is directly spelled out in black and white, or black and yellow, to the entrance of A New Hope.
I feel like what I saw in Rogue One, that was their first victory.
That's
like
according to it. I know that was shocking to me too. It's like
main battleship.
That's what it says in A New Hope, so I can only assume that this was their one and only victory, if you can even call it a victory.
I guess. I mean, I'm mostly focused on, like, this is their first victory? Like, this is their... like, this was their first victory?
First and only victory.
Well, I mean, you can debate that it's a victory or not, but, I mean, yeah, it's definitely not a victory. I would say.
First.
Yeah, but first,
they've been fighting 15 years. This is their first victory.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I thought that was interesting to go back and reread that piece. And also with the tie-in aspect of it, at the end, obviously, you see Leia and she escapes in her little jet, and the last thing you see is Vader going after her. You mean
wax doll Carrie Fisher? You get to see that?
I thought she looked fine. I didn't, but then I went back and read the reviews, and everybody thought she looked terrible. Now I thought Tarkin looked atrociously horrible.
Tarkin looked really bad. It was almost like when the camera kept on him for a while, you kind of started to maybe accept the thing, but then it snapped back to whoever he was talking to. Krennic. I just remembered his name. Krennic.
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
officer. Yeah, he like it snaps back to him, and you see Krennic's face, and you're like, oh god, that's what a real face looks like. What is this?
What
What is this monster?
What do I know? He looked horrible. I was like, oh, how could you do this to this guy?
Yeah, and also I'm just don't bring back dead people. You know, for
So that's a whole
your
nother
corporate
that's a
giant
whole
movie.
nother debate, because I've seen a lot of people saying that shouldn't happen and you can't bring back dead people. Me, I don't care. I say I'm all for it, because here's the thing. It's a character. At the end of the day, this is just a character. It's not a person. It's not the actor.
I can see
it's
that.
the character. That's who we're bringing back as the character. We're not bringing back a dead relative. You know, it's the character. So I am all for bringing back dead people all day long.
Out of context. Hashtag out of context.
But you know what I mean? Like, I'm all for it. So I would love to see, heck, I'd like to see a whole prequel of dead people. You know, Carrie Fisher running around with Tolkien with all the other people who've died since the first one. Like, do a whole expose on CG dead people Star Wars movie.
Yeah, sure. And plus, let's just get real here. Why? There's no need for Tarkin in this movie.
That is correct. I will say that he was forced in there. I wish they would, like I said, if they would have done more Death Star stuff, he's your guy. But the fact that they like shied away from all of that, like he served no purpose in this story at all, and could have been cut, and nobody would have known any different. So I wish they would have done more with him.
Yeah, honestly, all you have to do,
that he served a purpose for.
Mm-hmm. All you have to do is have Krennic throughout most of the movie, and then maybe he screws up or something, and then he gets killed, and then at the very end, I see you're here, Moff Tarkin, to oversee the project. Yes. Like what they did with Leia, was like, it was an acceptable, okay, you don't need a 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever with this CGI Leia character, just let her, or don't even put him on screen, just say, oh, Moff Tarkin will be arriving on Saturday. Don't say,
No, I see what you mean. Like I said, I thought, maybe I have to go back and watch it again, but I thought the Leia one was good, and I thought it was appropriate.
It was okay.
But the Tolkien was just a nightmare of a mess, and they really needed to fix him up. Also, so at the end too, like if we're still on this, obviously Leia's ship leaves. Darth Vader follows Leia, right? And then you can presume they somehow end up on Tatooine moments later, and A New Hope starts. So when Vader's on their ship and he's like walking through, and he's like, "Oh, this is a consular ship," and he's like, "If this is a consular, where's the ambassador?"
Where's the ambassador?
Why isn't he like, "No, you fool! I saw you leave that battle, and I just followed you here." Like, obviously,
oh my God, you're right.
Like he had eyes on the ship the whole time. Why is it?
Place?
Yeah.
Oh.
So see, that's why I want to go back and watch The New Hope, because I want to find little tidbits like that just have a whole new context to it, because all these people were just exposed to the Rogue One battle.
Yeah.
Because why would that guy even bother saying, "Oh, this is a consular ship, we're on a diplomatic mission"?
Well, yeah, what, who do you think you're gonna fool, buddy?
Yeah, exactly. Who are you kidding here? You just came from this battle.
Oh my God, you're right. Yeah, you said something earlier, and I wanted to touch on that because it's something that, I've dug into, just kind of poked into a couple of reviews that get associated to our Star Wars thing on YouTube, right? And so just like small time people doing what we're doing right now. And a reoccurring phrase I hear is, "It wasn't Star Wars," or "It was Star Wars." And I'm really interested in what do you think that means?
It's a very interesting question, because I think I've even used that phrase.
You used it in this review, and that's kind of got in my head. Like, this is a thing that I have heard over and over and over again.
I think it's hard to conceptualize, because I'll use another example that I use all the time, and that's James Bond. If you look at the have you seen the new James Bonds with like Daniel Craig?
Yeah.
Have you seen the old James Bonds with like?
Yes.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about here when I say James Bond. So when I say this is a James Bond movie, or when I say the Daniel Craig ones are not James Bond, because it's hard to pinpoint why it is, but you just know that the new ones don't match with the older style Pierce Brosnan on back.
But yeah, you're right. The new James Bond is Jason Bourne.
Right. No, yeah, exactly. That's a good way to explain it. It's not James Bond. They call it James Bond. They slapped James Bond on the box, but you could have called Daniel Craig, Steve, and nobody would have known it's a James Bond movie.
Yep. And I think maybe you could.
So when you go, coming back to Star Wars, when you say something is Star Wars or not Star Wars, I think it's hard to pin down what that actually means in today's world. Like, obviously, when you see X-Wings flying around or TIE fighters, you just know, you're like, yeah, Star Wars. You just know it when you see it, and you know it when it's not true. What do you think?
So it's a combination of hero's journey, space backdrop, and quality visual effects. And I think due to a large part in Star Wars, that the last part, the quality visual effects, was less and less impressive every year. Because
it's been
because
done.
You've seen it. Yeah. In Star Wars, like the original movie, like these were simple stories, all right? Like you didn't need to know Darth Vader's motivation and his complex reasoning for doing what he did, he was just a bad dude who was there to mess people up. That's at least my idea of what Star Wars is. I just think it's interesting that I've seen so many people saying, "Oh, finally, this is Star Wars. Oh, this is terrible. It's not Star Wars." Nobody's bothering to actually define, okay, what does it mean to be Star Wars or not?
And I think everybody has their own definition of what makes a Star Wars movie a Star Wars movie.
But honestly, I have a problem with even my definition of it because I have such a limited sample size. If we're only going by the movies, then I have, 9 hours of film to judge an entire rest of everything.
Right, and every new installment, does that, add to Star Wars, or do you specifically ignore movies because it's not Star Wars? You know what I mean?
The prequels are like a great example of that. Nothing from the prequels survives into these new movies. There are no droid robots. There's no Trade Federation. Count Dooku's ghost doesn't show up or whatever. For all intents and purposes, they seem to be dead.
Right, because especially I think they're being extra careful not to draw on that era of movies in these new ones. I think Disney's specifically trying to avoid them because of all the bad press. But once you establish something, you obviously can't ignore it. Like you said, the whole midichlorian thing. I mean, it's like that. They established that as a thing in the first one. Therefore, it must be true, whether they mention it or not in these later ones.
So that's another problem there, too. And that's not even counting the fact that Disney retroactively, with one stroke, destroyed all of the Star Wars extended universe canon. It's now not real, according to Disney. It was the only people who have any legitimacy in terms of making Star Wars, and this goes into another point that I really wanted to make, which is Disney and copyright law. I'm sorry, it's been 40 years. At some point, Star Wars needs to pass into the public domain.
60 or 70 years after the death of the creator.
But that's insane.
Because
70 years after the death of the creator. So,
it's something like that. Because, here's the thing.
Grandkids are going to be, rolling around.
Yes.
Living it up on,
on their grandfather's thing. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Because here's the thing. We haven't reached the modern era of when a lot of the modern media properties become public domain, right? It's all from 1800s or something like that. But I think Mickey Mouse becomes public domain in 2023 or something like that, which I know last I heard Disney's fighting tooth and nail to keep their copyright on Mickey Mouse. But I mean, that's a real thing. That's right around the corner of Disney losing copyright on Mickey Mouse and Mickey Mouse entering public domain.
Yeah, and
pretty soon.
And Mickey, who's more powerful, Disney or Congress? I don't think it's Congress.
Right.
I foresee a long, slow burnout of Star Wars, which is, probably what's going to happen for the Marvel movies too. Eventually people are going, in 2040, people are not going to see Avengers 15. I'm going to make that bold prediction right now. and they won't be seeing Star Wars either. Like unless there's a fresh take on it.
I bet they will, because Star Wars is one of those phenomenons that I don't think can die out, because for one thing, it's set in the future, or really far, far away, a long time ago. But you know what I mean? Like, it's set so far in the future, it's seen as a futuristic movie, and no matter how many you make, it will always be set in the future. And I think that's a huge draw for people of seeing this epic space battle type of movie, or epic, aka not necessarily space battle, but epic futuristic movie. I think there's always
You're right.
there's always going to be some relevancy there in society, no matter how far in the future you go. And so, your fresh take on Star Wars, I think, will always come up every 10, 20 years at least, I suspect.
Well, I there have you ever played the KOTOR games?
The what?
The Knights of the Old Republic.
No.
KOTOR 2 has a character in it. It's one of my favorite Star Wars. It is my favorite Star Wars character ever. Okay, and it's a ex-Sith, or really ex-Jedi, ex-Sith, who hates the Force. Like she was a Jedi, and then she got kicked out, and then like she palled around with the Sith for a while or whatever, and then that went south. So she bailed on that. She hates the Force. Mm-hmm. She hates the fact that there's this thing out there that seems to have its own agenda and seems to control events. It's like when the dude from Rogue One or whatever is walking up to the thing and the switch, and he's not getting hit. Like, the stormtroopers certainly want to hit him. Their will is being defied by this thing that they can't control. And she hates that. Her deal is that she wants to, destroy the Force. And that's an entirely new, take on Star Wars.
Yep.
All right? That was incredibly interesting. And you're not going to get that from Disney. I mean, well, maybe you will, but I don't think so. Not nice, safe, neat Marvel movie, Disney. You're not going to get that.
No, I don't think so either. You did spark something that I find interesting, because to me, you can remove the Force from all of these movies, and I don't think you change anything.
Not really.
And similar to our discussion on Man in the High Castle, the Force is just this weird sci-fi overlay of some unexplained thing that serves no purpose in the long run. And
no,
I think Star Wars would be stronger without it.
Yeah, and my question is, what is the Force? What is this thing? So I might go back to Alamo Drafthouse, the most amazing theater watching experience on Earth. Episode 8. Do you think you'll do the same, or do you think that you'll for real wait this time?
Well, it depends if you force me to do another one of these reviews. I have a small suspicion that we'll be doing one of these once a year for a long time to come. We're also up to 6 subscribers, so we're making a difference in somebody's life.
If you're listening to this, don't you have anything better to do? Well, I think that wraps it up then, doesn't it?
I think it does. Unless you have any final comments on Rogue One.
I don't really. It's not something that I tore my hair out, but it's I'm not gonna. Could I recommend it to somebody? Not really. I would recommend it to maybe if you're a rabid Star Wars fan, but if you are a rabid Star Wars fan, I'm just to take it easy, take a step back. It's okay. You'll be fine. Yeah.
For me, I think I'm glad I watched it, because I was kind of looking forward to see how they tell the story of an actual real prequel. Is it worth my $10.08? Probably not.
No.
But I think it's like a $5 experience, or I would have paid.
Yeah,
that.
wait till it's the dollar theater and check it out.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm kind of glad I kind of watched it. I think it is one of those movies I got to go back and watch a couple times so I can catch things that I missed the first time around, because there's just so much thrown at you. I was totally lost through the first half, and I didn't really get engaged into the story until that final battle, which has its own problems, as we discussed. But for the first half of the movie, I was completely lost of what was going on. So I think it's one of those I got to go back and watch again at some point. And even the other one, Force Awakens, I've only seen once, and I probably should at some point go back and rewatch it, even though I really didn't like the movie at all. But Rogue One, I am glad to say that this one was better than Force Awakens, because Force Awakens is approaching Episode 3 territory.
It really is. It really
into
is.
the
Really
unwatchable segments of movies. This one I can sit through. This one I can actually watch. So while it certainly has its flaws, certainly didn't necessarily like the direction it went, I felt like I could at least sit through it. And maybe that's half the battle right there, is make it something that people actually sit through.
I mean, I think that's a fair assessment.
This has been a presentation of Honey Sound Broadcasting, an affiliate of the Bilko Media Network.